So today we're picking up, I finished this book, Wheat and Weeds and the Wolf of Gubbio. I think that's how you pronounce it. So there's two pieces from here I'm going to read today. Let's jump right into it. So the Wheat and Weeds and the Wolf of Gubbio. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I have no idea. No idea. So today's gospel was the parable of the wheat among the weeds. I think the priest preached a good sermon on it, but I missed it. As soon as the gospel ended, I started thinking about my dad. All his life, my father was a fanatic about two things: horror movies and a weed-free lawn. The lawn satisfied his need to keep his world under control. Dogs didn't dare leave souvenirs on our lawn. Falling leaves knew better than to land on our yard. And weeds, well, let's just say any weed foolish enough to enter our yard soon learned the meaning of a kamikaze mission. He could spot a dandelion from the breakfast table and be out the door and back again with the satisfied grin on his face before my mother could pour him a fresh cup of coffee. His other passion was horror movies, and his particular favorites were movies about werewolves. We saw them all, my dad and I, from Lon Chaney to Michael J. Fox, with my father jabbing me in the ribs to punctuate all the exciting parts. Weeds and werewolves. Hated one and loved the other. As he grew older, he started sprouting. Now don't get grossed out. Ear and nose hair. It traumatized him. Hair growing at will in places where he didn't want it. He went after it with a vengeance, despite my mother's insisting it was sexy. I'd see him in the front of the mirror, snipping his hair and hearing him mumble something about these damn weeds. His fantastic effort to be in control and to protect his lawn and his own body from unwanted growth made it all the harder to understand his fascination with werewolves. I mean, talk about loss of control and unwanted growth. One night, as the credits of some old horror film were scrolling up our TV screen, and I was feigning interest in the artists and the technicians who had created this monstrous masterpiece, he assaulted my drooping eyes and nodding head with his best Lon Chaney imitation. Through bared teeth, he hissed, "Don't be frightened, my child. There's a werewolf in each of us." Then he sprang to his feet, howled a laugh, hit the TV switch, and growled again. A wolf deep down inside us all. And he held his sides to contain his laughter. I laughed politely, but later I thought hard about his words. I guess I sensed a subconscious struggle in my dad, some deep down approach avoidance conflict, which expressed itself in his twin passion for weeds and wolves. I inherited my father's dislike for weeds, but his passion for wolves eluded me. Little Red Riding Hood, the Three Little Pigs, and my sister's first attempts at dating taught me wolves weren't to be trusted. Then I read about Francis and the Wolf of Gubbio. And my father came leaping towards me from those pages. It's true, the parable of the wheat and weeds got lost on my dad. He never saw the sense of letting weeds grow anywhere. But another part of him sensed that each of us is a weed as well as wheat. Only for him, weeds came dressed in wolves' clothing. The violent, uncontrollable parts of my dad began to breathe and growl right along with Lon Chaney and every other man-to-wolf transformation he witnessed on the screen. But that scream was his silver bullet, keeping at bay the frightening reality he sensed within himself. And maybe my dad spent so much time weeding the yard because he sensed, after all, that the wolf weed in his heart was one of those which had to be allowed to grow along with the wheat. It's been a long road for me since making the realization about my dad, since reading the story of Francis and becoming convinced by his willingness to face that wolf alone and unprotected without the benefit of any silver bullet. Francis knew what my dad knew about what lives deep down inside us all. But he did what my dad could never do. He stood helpless and vulnerable before that terrifying power, that renegade wolf. More than that, he recognized that the wolf was a brother, and he loved him. Francis knew that if he couldn't love that wolf, he couldn't love himself. No doubt Francis' own heart had sometimes filled with hurt and anger. But he had learned that fear, denial, and retaliation don't purge the heart of unwanted passions, though love and understanding might. Francis's courage fed my own, and I have played the monk on the four-footed citizen of Gubbio in my soul. Played meditator between him and the two-footed Jubians in my life. Those frightened citizens who have hurt and scared me with their misunderstanding and their fears, and whom I've hurt. Meeting Francis and his wolf has made it easier to remember that all the wolves I meet are just poor creatures like myself, whose claws and fangs are no sharper than my own. Now, I pull fewer weeds, and I watch more horror movies, and I think my dad would probably approve. Pretty cute story. Let's hit one more. Finished this book. It's pretty good. It's pretty inspirational. Lots of poems. Pretty good stuff. So this one is called Sometimes a Dreamer. And there's like two types of this poem. The other poem is also called Sometimes a Woman. But this version is Sometimes a Dreamer. In the beginning, there was a dreamer. Sometimes that's all it takes, a dreamer, a gentle heart and strong vision, who knows how to act and when to pray, who hears the cry of the poor and gladly sings their song, who recognizes nail prints in needy hands and tired feet, and who believes without placing hands in wounded side. Sometimes one dreamer is enough to focus the vision of a nation. And sometimes one dreamer's footsteps are so big that others follow and find their way along the path. Sometimes one dreamer sees so clearly that others become unafraid to look at things they never saw before. Sometimes one dreamer hears so well that others start moving to a music they never knew was playing. Sometimes one dreamer's faith is so clear that reality becomes larger than circumstances, and no shock, no death, no fire, no rejection, no opposition, no misunderstanding or detraction can rob their holy peace. Sometimes a dreamer walks such a smooth and level road that hovers above life's circumstances. And when the circumstances change or crumble, the faith path they walk remains stable and unshaken. Sometimes in hard times, always in hard times, never easy, such a dreamer appears. And that time becomes God time, miracle time, blessed and sainted time. A dreamer comes who loses a spouse, who becomes a refuge for the widow, who watches children die and becomes mother of those lost and abandoned, who sees flames consume the years of work and becomes consumed with doing the will of God. And those of us who long for miracles and saints look on and realize that no age is an age of saints until a single heart is born, and through its courage makes it so. And then, through the mystery and miracle of love, one such heart becomes many. Hands are multiplied, promises are made, and the hopeless find hope. The weary find rest. The homeless are sheltered. The hungry are fed. The prisoners are visited. The dead are buried. A house in ruins is raised up. In God's kingdom, brick by painful, joyful brick becomes visible among us. In the beginning, there was a dreamer, Jesus of Nazareth, who inflamed voices and continued to challenge. Paul of Tareso, Augustine of Hippo, Benedict of Scholastia, Francis of Clare, Catherine of Siena, Teresa of Avila, Ignatius of Loyola, Joan of Arc, Elizabeth Ann Seton, Thomas Merton, Dorothy Day, Oscar Romero, Mother Teresa, Pope John the 23rd. And in God's plan, that's all it took to fashion a history that spans 2,000 years, to engender a community that encompasses millions of dedicated lives, to establish centers of healing and learning, places of refuge and compassion, to inspire an uncompromising commitment to the poor, and to become the life givers of the past we come to celebrate in a future we dare to fashion. Gotta be a believer.